Thank you for joining me here at the ResQ podcast, where we are part of Vertical Podcast Network known as Helicast. Thank you to Vertical Magazine for putting this together, and they support all of us, the Hangers Eat podcast, the Helicopter podcast, the Valor Flight Crew podcast, and the Vertical MRO podcast. You can find all of them at verticalhelicast.com. Now, a quick shout out to our sponsors for this episode. We have SpectroLab, a Boeing company. Over 50 years of high-intensity lighting solutions for airborne and land-based searchlight systems. Check them out at spectrolab.com. Precision Aviation Group. Their precision is the key to your performance. Check them out at precisionaviationgroup.com. Blue Drop Training and Simulation. Blue Drop designs and develops advanced training solutions, including high interactive courseware and state-of-the-art virtual and augmented reality training. Check them out today at bluedropts.com. ReadyBAR, high performance meal bars. All fuel, zero crash. Check them out today at getreadybar.com. Make sure you enter ResQ10 for 10% off. And go to the realrescuestore.com to get all your podcast gear. All right, now let's get into this episode. A few fun facts about our guest. One time, he won $100 off a Coca-Cola's Pop the Top can contest. That was when it ran in 2000. As an even better bonus to that, it was a free can of soda at a car dealership. His favorite food is buffalo wings. And his favorite barbecue sauce is Alabama white sauce. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Dr. Ryan Dowdy. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real Rescue Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Real Rescue Podcast. This is an ASTerisk episode, and I am psyched to have our next guest with us because he is a doctor in food science. And I didn't even know there was such a thing until I met this guy. So I'm pretty excited. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Ryan Dowdy. What's up, dude?
Thanks, Quinny. Thanks for having me on the Real Rescue. This is great.
Oh, heck yeah. One of the things that I'm really excited about this with, and we're going to talk to like a whole lot, is nutrition. And I love nutrition. I love everything about it. I try to eat healthy myself. I do have my occasional junk food, but occasional whiskey, whatever. But it's the way I look at it is for me, it's like an 80-20, 80%. I try to make it perfect.
That's how you do
20%, let it ride. Yeah. Just
everything in moderation, including moderation itself.
Right on. See, yes. Yeah. Right there. I love it. And with that, we're out. No, I'm just kidding. But all right, so let me give you a little shout out here, man. So you are not only a doctor in food nutrition and food science, you worked at NASA for a while, sending food to space. What? That is awesome. And you are the creator and founder of ReadyBAR, which I absolutely love. So shout out to that right now. And we're gonna get into that later. But man, let's start right from the beginning, man. Where are you from? Let's get a little background about you and then how the heck do you get into food science? What the heck is food science?
Great question. Food science is the science behind all the foods that you find in the grocery store, whether it's a can of tomato soup or a head of lettuce or a cut of meat. It's the chemistry, the engineering, and the microbiology behind making these foods safe for people to eat. So it's the chemistry behind, like, what's the pH of a can of beans? Because you got to make sure you know what the pH is so that when you subject it to a certain time and temperature combination, when you're heating it up to kill all the bad bacteria, you got to know exactly what that pH is, time and temperature is, and then you test it microbiologically to make sure that all the bacteria have been killed. So it's all of these things combined into making foods last longer, taste better, and be safer for everybody.
Wow. Man, here I am thinking like when I was jarring salmon up in Alaska. I'm like, yeah, it's good. Wait, the top sucked in. It's totally fine.
Yeah, that's a great point. So when you're jarring your own salmon, make sure you're following a widely known and used recipe, and
Oh,
you should be
roger
just
that.
fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't go rogue. If you do not go rogue with can, that's my number one piece of advice as a food scientist. Do not go rogue with home canning. That's a recipe for disaster. You are gonna hurt yourself. Don't go rogue with canning. Follow known recipes.
Roger that, huh?
Yeah.
I'm glad we can start this out this way. This is good.
Yeah, be careful with the salmon. Be careful with the salmon.
Oh, that's great. Noted. Noted. All right, so Ryan, where are you from?
I'm from Alabama originally. I grew up in Auburn, Alabama, War Eagle. And after growing up, I wanted to head out. I ended up studying food science at North Carolina State University and had a great
Nice.
opportunity there to intern at NASA. And, about that time, my predecessor, Vicky, she was the one who managed all the food for the International Space Station before I got there. She was ready to retire. And so they needed someone to step into Vicky's role, which is meeting with all the astronauts, customizing all their menus, making sure all the food gets launched on the right rocket. And these are launched around the world. They're launched from Russia, from Japan, from French Guiana. They're launched all around the world to get food up to the International Space Station. So there's resupply missions going on all the time. And so the food lab's job is to meet with the astronauts, figure out exactly what they want to eat while they're in space, make that food, package that food, ship it all around the world, and then send it up on one of these rockets to the International Space Station. So it's a lot of logistics, a lot of food science, and it was a whole lot of fun.
Wow. Yeah. Hey, that's not even something I ever really even thought about until really I talked to you. And it's, you know what, I'm gonna throw this out there because so you and I met kind of in a unique way. Is that we connected through email, we went back and forth, and I remember like Ryan Dowdy, who is this guy? Next thing you know, I'm on a search. Like, who are you? And I see this pull on video pop up on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's an hour lecture of you talking about everything that you're doing with NASA or you were doing with NASA in order to do all stuff. I was like, damn, this dude's legit. And I got sucked in for like an hour, hour and a half for that whatever your lecture was. It was great. So
well, when I cold emailed you and I was like, I love your podcast. And I had shared your podcast with my brother who used to be a first responder also. And he was like, this is really cool. These stories are amazing. And so anyway, I emailed you and I said, hey, I have this idea for a company. I want to talk with you about it. I want to see if it could be good for Coast Guard rescue swimmers. And so you thought it was a phishing email, obviously. You were like,
totally did.
You were like, let's put this in the folder where I'm a Nigerian prince and I need your bank account information to wire money. I feel like I kind of got dropped into the Nigerian prince folder for a while, and then you're like, wait, no. You were like, thanks to Google, this guy's actually he's actually a real person. He actually did used to work at NASA, so I'm glad things worked out.
Yeah, me too. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Well, it one of the part of it that I really like the fact that you and I got talking is all the nutrition stuff that I've literally learned from you since you and I have been talking. This is one of the reasons I've asked you to come on is not just because of ReadyBAR and that's another amazing invention that you've come up with through working with NASA to get food to space, but the nutrition side of things, like one of them when you and I were talking, we were talking about olive oil, which I legitimately try to use on a regular basis just to cook my eggs. It's a good fat that I like to have. And you were like, oh yeah, just make sure you buy the smaller bottle instead of the bigger bottle so it doesn't go rancid. Yeah. And I remember looking at you like, wait a minute, what? Because it's all I do is buy the big ones, like Costco brand. You're like, I got that one, and like, oh no, that's not good. So I'll tell you what, touch on that real quick, and then we're gonna circle into deep stuff.
100%. Let's talk about olive oil. So if you buy olive oil and you use a lot of olive oil, buy it in one of those metal containers. You want it to be in the metal. Don't let it be in the clear plastic or like in the tinted green plastic. It'll go skunky because light and oxygen and moisture makes foods go bad faster. So if you're going to buy bulk olive oil, buy one of those big, like, made in Italy metal, like a gasoline canister. You know what I'm talking about? Buy the gasoline canister. Yeah. But when you buy bulk, do not buy it in the translucent plastic, because what's going to happen is light is going to get in there and it's going to make it go rancid faster. And then it doesn't have all the nutritive properties that it has when it was first made. So it actually does go bad. It's not as useful to your body over time. And, I'll do a quick shout out to the packaging for, the food product that I've worked on. Is it has metal inside. It actually has an aluminum layer within the packaging to help block out all this light and oxygen and moisture. So this is true across foods. It's like whether it's olive oil or whether it's a protein bar that's meant to last 2 years, you really want to protect your foods. Almost like, you want to protect your skin from the sun. It's the same thing. There's damaging effects to all these biological molecules. But keep eating the olive oil. If you buy bulk, buy the giant gasoline canister of it from Italy. But if you're at the grocery store and you're, let's say you don't use olive oil like every meal, every single day, you don't use it a lot. My recommendation is buy a small amount. Otherwise, it's going to sit in your cupboard for 5 years and it's just going to get real skunky.
Wild, right? Me personally, I had no idea about that. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing it with everybody else. It's good stuff. So let's talk about packaging. And again, I want to get back to that. But you know what? Let me ask another question. Like going to school, what drew you into doing food science?
Yeah, I think I was kind of born to do it. So my dad was an engineer and my mom was a home economist. And so if you combine like the food aspects of home economics with engineering, that's literally what food science is. It's literally engineering foods. And so I think it's just in my blood. Other kids growing up in our neighborhood, they had lemonade stands, right? Well, I was the kid that would mix oil and water and food coloring, and I'd put them into glass jars and I'd sell them on the street for 10 cents a piece. And I said chemicals, 10 cents each. And I think the neighbors were just, the neighbors were like, who's this weirdo? Like, we feel bad for him. Let's just support this kid. He probably, he's a weirdo. And so anyway, that was me as a kid. And then, once I had gone to college, I really realized I wanted to start my own business. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to make liquor out of sweet potatoes. So North Carolina produces some of the most sweet potatoes in the United States. And I had wanted to make vodka out of sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are a great source for vodka. You can get a really clean vodka out of it. And North Carolina just produces an enormous amount of sweet potatoes. And the number one scientist for sweet potatoes in the world was working at North Carolina State University. So I went there for food science. And first week I'm in school there, I sit down with the guy and he's like, oh yeah, you have a great idea. That's a good idea to make liquor out of sweet potatoes. There's this other company that's been in stealth mode for 3 years and they just came out of stealth mode and they're already doing it. And I was like, I was heartbroken. I was like, my life, everything was shattered. I was just licking my wounds for a week. I was like, what am I going to do? Like this great idea, this like light bulb moment that I had, it was just totally shattered by, this other company already doing it. But then I was already in school and there were, for food science, and there were all these companies. We would have different companies come and present to us each week and talk about the different foods that they're making. Whether it's like butterball turkey and how they're figuring out how to slice it so that it's better for consumers and it's easier to eat. And so you don't have to cut it yourself. And, companies like that, like Hormel, like PepsiCo, like Frito-Lay, all these companies are presenting and they're like, we really need young food scientists to join our companies because human population keeps growing and growing and we need food scientists to make good, healthy food for the growing population. And I say, you know what, if the sweet potato vodka thing didn't work out, I think there's going to be other opportunities. So I stuck with food science and I think it was the right choice. And, after going to NASA and working in food technology for several years, I got the opportunity to start my own company and I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah, which is awesome. And I love it. But before we get into that too much, again, the ReadyBAR was designed to go to space for the astronauts to help get food into space. That's the bottom line, right? So what I want to learn is let's talk creating food for astronauts. Like,
Sure.
what do they need up there? And then another thing that I, again, don't realize, it's not something you think about until I talk to somebody like you. It's their expiration date. You need an extended amount of time.
Yeah.
Like most of the grocery stores, like if you roll up in there and be like, hey, I'm gonna buy a bag of X, whatever X might be, it might be a year at most.
At
A
most,
lot
yeah.
of the, and I'll even compare some of the other bars that are out there, not name dropping any of them at the moment, but they might have a 6-month like expiration date, and then they're junk.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like the expiration date is good. You can't be
Yeah.
sending that to space. It
Yeah.
takes 6 months to get up there.
It takes just 6 months to get up there. And then you've got the fact that we're a team of about 20 people in Houston making food for the astronauts, and we've got to make 200 different items at least. So that's just on the standard menu. That's like the buffet line that the astronauts eat from, where everybody gets like, this is the lunch container, this is the desserts and snacks container, this is the breakfast container. There are a few standard containers that are being sent up. We make 200 different foods for it. And then, because we're making 200 different foods, we've really, because of how much time it takes to make, let's say, a batch of freeze-dried scrambled eggs, for example, you make that once a year or once every 2 years because of how, right? And so on top of, so it takes 6 months. If you backtrack it, let's start at the ISS. So at the International Space Station, food may be sitting in storage on the ISS for 6 months, maybe up to a year, before it's eaten. After it gets there on, let's say, a SpaceX resupply rocket, might be 6 months to a year before the astronauts eat it. And then on the resupply rocket, a lot of times we got to get food. We got to ship that food like 6 months before the rocket launches because of international customs, because of how long it takes to get all the cargo in and integrated and actually set up on the vehicle and launch. That might be another 6 months. And then you might have another 1 or 2 years that the food is sitting in storage on the ground because of how long it takes this team of 20 to make 200 different items. So for all those reasons, and the fact that we want food to last a long time when it gets into space, because there's no refrigeration on the ISS. There's not enough electricity. Yeah. They have like a really tiny refrigerator, but it's not like they do not have a refrigerator like we have at home. So, we have huge refrigerators. Americans have huge refrigerators, and that allows us to store a lot of fresh foods, a lot of meat, vegetables, a lot of produce. We are able to get a lot of fresh foods, and you can't do that on the ISS because they don't have a full-size refrigerator, right? Because there's not enough electricity. All that electricity, that's going to critical life support systems. That's going to the oxygen. That's going to the water recycling. That's going to keeping the lights on and making sure that you're able to keep this gigantic machine running. So there wasn't enough electricity to put a full-size refrigerator on there. So what they did for the ISS was they said, we're going with a shelf-stable food system. So that means all the food has to be able to sit at room temperature for years and still be good to eat. So that's the big difference with challenge. The ISS. It was a huge challenge, yeah. And when you're eating foods, let's say you're eating your foods like your freeze-dried scrambled eggs, it's a real challenge because we got to figure out for all these 200 different food items, how do you make them last that long? So for the scrambled eggs, you might freeze dry that. For other stuff, you got your cherry blueberry cobbler. It kind of looks like an MRE. It's similar packaging, which is made to last a really long time. But this is thermostabilized. So this goes through a canning process. It goes into a hot canning process, just like a can of tomato soup, but it's a flexible pouch so that it weighs less and it's easier to launch into space. So there are lots of different technologies that NASA uses to make these foods last a long time and make them safe for the astronauts to eat, even though it takes a while for it to get up there.
We're going to divert real quick to thank our sponsors.
SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our third generation Night Sun series, high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights.
Dang, man. All right, you mentioned a couple times like the menu. I didn't even. Is this like an all-you-can-eat menu? Is this like I can order before I go up, or?
Oh, great question.
What's a menu? What's a menu look like in space?
Oh, that's a great question. So the ISS standard menu was 10 different containers. There was a breakfast, desserts and snacks, fruits and nuts, meats and fish. We also had rehydratable meats, and we had a vegetables and soups container. We had a bar. We had a container of just bars. We had a container of just soy sauce, hot sauce, mustard, ketchup. So there was a huge variety, but what NASA has learned over years and years is that even with a menu of 200 items, that's like the absolute minimum you can have. Like we are, Americans are enormously blessed with the amazing variety that we have in our grocery stores, and we've got well more than 200 items. But the astronauts are just eating from a standard menu of 200 different items for a 6-month stint on the ISS. So that's like you going home, and you know when you go home and you just pop open the refrigerator, you might not be hungry, you might not look, you just pop it out. You're like, what do we got? What are we going to eat tonight? What are we going to cook tonight? Let's pop open this refrigerator door. As humans, we want to pop open that refrigerator door, and we want to see something new. We want to see something interesting. We want to eat something different. You know, astronauts, 6 months on the ISS, they're essentially popping open that refrigerator door, and they're seeing the exact same thing every single day for 6 months. And that's tough. So that's why you got to have at least 200 menu items just for the International Space Station. So what we did, that's the standard menu. Let's say Jason Quinn is an astronaut. And
I like this already.
Right? So astronaut Quinny, once you know you are getting put into rotation to go up to the ISS, you're going to meet with us in the food lab. And I have a one-on-one meeting with you where we discuss, hey, if you're going to be there for 6 months, you're going to need, 8 containers that are just for you. So these are giant, we call them BOBs, bulk overwrap bags. These were giant containers that NASA uses to put all this food in there. So it's a lightweight space launching configuration. And so we would meet with astronaut Quinny and we would say, hey, what do you want in your maybe 8 different crew-specific menu containers? And Quinny likes beef jerky and chips. And we say, okay, astronaut Quinny, this is your first time on the ISS. What we're going to tell you is that's a good idea to buy the beef jerky, but you will not want to be eating the same beef jerky for 6 months. You're going to get tired of it. So we would work with astronaut Quinny to say, okay, you want beef jerky? Let's get you these 5 different flavors, and we'll space them out among these 8 different containers so that as you open them over the course of your 6 months in space, you're getting new stuff. You're getting interesting stuff. And so for the chips, for example, we would say, okay, astronaut Quinny, you're the rookie. Just to let you know, the astronauts who have been up there are not big fans of opening those chip bags because the crumbs get everywhere and can actually get into your eyes and nose because you get crumbs floating around in space. So it can get into people's eyes and nose. You inhale it accidentally. You can get it stuck in the filters that are trying to recycle the air on the ISS. So we work with the astronauts for all these reasons to make sure that the food we're sending up for them is delicious, but that it's also safe, that it doesn't have a lot of FOD, foreign object debris. So that tends to be, the method for getting food up for these folks. And it's one of the things that's so important is variety and flavor, because you gotta keep, whether it's astronauts or whether it's Coast Guard rescue swimmers or it's wildland firefighters, structural firefighters, you gotta keep people eating and interested in food, because top performers, this is what NASA learned over years and years of studies, is that astronauts who are essentially endurance athletes, they got to be working out for 2 hours a day to make sure that they don't lose their bone and muscle density. You got to feed these folks an extra 500 to 1,000 calories per day, and you got to keep them working out. Otherwise, they're going to lose their muscle mass. They lose their bone density. They're not going to be able to perform their tasks in space when they go on spacewalks to fix things, to make sure they're doing preventive maintenance on the outside of the ISS for all this hardware that's going on. And then you got to make sure that they don't lose the muscle mass so that they can actually walk when they get back to Earth. I mean, you've seen the photos of people coming back, like landing in Kazakhstan, and they land there, and it's tough to just stand up and walk around because, you know, you're under gravity again. You haven't been walking the same way that you've been for 6 months. So you got to fuel top performers with high performance fuel. And if you don't feed high performers with high performance fuel, you're not going to get high performance. And that was a huge, huge focus of what we did at the food lab at NASA, was making sure that all the food was built for high performance.
Dude, that's insane. That is like, I'm just trying to, I'm running through everything you just said, like chips, the little chip, like floating around in space.
Yeah.
Getting your eye. That, never even dawned on me.
Yeah. So that's something. When I started my own company, I felt that was something that NASA has figured out that's really important and can actually work really well for other practices in aeronautics, other folks in aeronautics and aviation. Is, I mean, it's true if you're a firefighter as well. You don't want to be getting crumbs all over the inside of your engine. You don't want to get crumbs all over the inside of your cockpit or on the inside, right? You don't want crumbs getting all over your uniform.
Back of the helicopter sucks.
No.
Get that little spot, you gotta clean it out, then it smells bad later. Terrible.
Yeah, terrible. You don't want your food getting everywhere. So that's what one of the things I focused on was making it a no crumble texture, because I didn't want it like those granola bars that are stuck together. They're sort of glued together, granola bars glued together with corn syrup.
Yeah.
You bite into those and you get like pieces of oats and nuts flying all over the place. And so with ReadyBAR, I just wanted to make sure that it's really, it innovates on what NASA has learned over the years, which is you want a no crumble design when you're working in these high performance environments.
Right on. I'm going to bring us back a little bit, because you had mentioned like having to sit down with the astronauts and literally having a conversation with them about what they want, right?
Yeah.
There's another side of this of like, and I think about my wife quite a bit with this, because dietary restrictions. Do you guys have like, did that something all of a sudden, and I'm probably like exaggerating with this, but I'm lactose intolerant, or I'm a vegan, like, and I'm bringing it really more, I guess, literally down to earth and the average person. But did you run into that with some of the astronauts?
100%. And it was a big challenge, and it's something that I worked hard to try and help fix while I was there. So the food system for the International Space Station, let's take like our cherry blueberry cobbler, for example. These 200 items on the standard menu, they were developed decades ago, starting with the shuttle program, when we were feeding astronauts for the shuttle program. So that's literally when there was decades ago.
You're talking like the recipe was designed and made a few decades ago, and we still use it today?
Yep, decades ago. I mean, it's government money. If it ain't broke, don't fix it is the motto. It's government, So, but that was one of the big issues, is that, I mean, let's take. So when I came on at NASA, we still had vanilla pudding on the menu, let's say, and we just had some stuff that was extremely popular on shuttle crews, because people were eating that in 1990. But people change and people's dietary preferences change. And so there's a much larger percentage of gluten intolerant people or vegetarians in the United States today. Or, I mean, for example, 50% of Americans either have diabetes or are pre-diabetic. So we've got a vastly, right? And then you've got a lot of people eating low carb diets. So that's for Americans as a whole. And astronauts are a subset of Americans. They have similar eating restrictions, right? Like you get a lot of variety in diets and eating restrictions there as well. And that was one thing that I really worked hard to try and change, was moving some of these older menu items off and putting on new ones that looked good, tasted good, and were good for you. So, for example, we moved off stuff like grits, which there was one astronaut who loved the grits. And for years and years, they were like, you can't get rid of the grits. We love the grits too much. So the approach that I took was I started a working group with members of the astronaut course. We got astronauts in there. We got members of the ISS program in there. We got the nutritionist in there, the head nutritionist for NASA. And we got all our food scientists in there. And we all work collaboratively to look at the actual data, figure out what's nobody eating. Nobody's eating the grits. What are the foods that look good, taste good, and they're good for you? And these are the new R&D foods like freeze-dried Brussels sprouts, for example.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Freeze-dried Brussels sprouts? Are you kidding me?
Nobody else is making freeze-dried Brussels sprouts, but NASA's making freeze-dried Brussels sprouts because it's the only way to get the fiber and the greens and the phytonutrients and all these really nutritious materials, this crunch. It's really hard to get a crunch in space when you're eating a lot of canned foods, essentially. NASA's making freeze-dried Brussels sprouts and trying to figure out how do we get this into space? How do we get this into the astronauts' diet? So that was one thing that I really worked hard was setting up this ISS standard menu working group and just pushing off these foods like grits, vanilla pudding that people honestly are not eating anymore. They ate back in the day on shuttle, but they aren't eating anymore. And putting on these new food items that NASA's working to develop that look good, taste good, and are good for you. And so we really revamped the whole food system for the ISS. And I'm really proud that working group is still operating today. And the astronauts loved that we made this working group because they're like, oh, now we actually have a process for changing up these 200 items on the standard menu. We got a process that's validated, it's collaborative, everybody's good with it, astronauts are good with it, ISS standard menu working group is coming up with these recommendations, ISS program's happy with it, and so we're actually able to make a change in this really sticky, you work for the government, it's a sticky red tape bureaucracy, it can be hard to make changes, but if you get the right people in the room and you work together to figure out what's nobody eating and what are foods that the astronauts are eating and they do want to eat, those are the changes that we made. Also, we put a bunch more caffeine in the standard menu. So when I got there, they didn't include any tea or coffee on the standard menu. And that was because the way that astronaut Quinny wanted his coffee was completely different than the way that astronaut Scott wanted his coffee. And we have to package coffee individually into pouches. So we mix the coffee powder, instant coffee powder. We use Hawaiian instant coffee powder, mix it with, sugar or Equal or non-fat dry milk or, Coffee Mate powder. Like everybody wants it differently. And so historically, we never included coffee or tea. And then the astronauts would always be like, man, can you send us some more coffee? Like, because they're working out 1 to 2 hours a day. They're like, man, we need it. Like, they're trying to push hard while they're up there. They're trying to get as much out of every hour as they can. And so one of the things I worked on with the ISS Standard Menu Working Group was actually getting coffee and tea on the menu. And it's true that people like variety in their coffee, but it's also true that the astronauts would rather have a lot of extra black coffee sitting there for, emergency caffeine fuel than not. And so, like, for example, like nobody's drinking milk. Nobody was drinking milk on the standard menu. We were sending up a lot of milk, and milk was more popular when people were drinking it during the shuttle era. And the ISS astronauts just weren't drinking it as much anymore. So we got milk off the menu. Let's put on the coffee and tea. Let's caffeinate these folks. Let's get these high performers the fuel that they need. So I was really proud of that, and that's something that NASA continues to do today is continuous optimization of all the foods that we're sending into space.
That is wild to me. Wow. We're going to divert real quick to thank our sponsors.
Blue Drop Training and Simulation. Blue Drop Training and Simulation for equipping your team with essential training solutions, including highly interactive courseware and advanced VR, MR simulation training tools. Explore more of Blue Drop's training solutions at bluedropts.com.
All right, you've said it a couple times. Like these guys up in space, they're working hard. They're burning mega calories. They're working out hard for 2 hours a day. So what I want to get into is a bit of the nutrition side of it. and really dial deep into that. So right now, I can say that I follow, like I told you earlier, in 80-20. 80%, I try to keep a perfect diet. And when I say perfect, like I'm talking poached or boiled chicken, maybe a steak, egg whites and eggs mixed in the morning with vegetables. No processed food for me, if I can help it. And then that 20% is, oh, you know what? We're out having pizza because a friend invited us to a pizza party, or it's somebody's birthday and you're having a birthday cake.
Yep.
Like I don't cut myself. Neither my wife or I cut ourselves completely out, but I try to eat as healthy as possible. Now let's bring it over to the astronauts, right? So they're in, like, they don't get the fresh vegetables like we have here. I do a zone diet, or I count calories. What does that look like for them? And how do you hit like nutritional values, your proteins, good fats, and your good carbohydrates?
Yeah. That was one of the big challenges for the ISS, was because these foods were developed decades ago, the majority of these were for the shuttle program. A lot of them, like, again, let's talk about cherry blueberry cobbler or the chocolate cake that was sent up to the ISS. These things were delicious, but the issue was they had a lot of sugar in them. And now we know, with 50% of Americans either diabetic or pre-diabetic, we know that we need to decrease the amount of processed sugars in our diet. And you're right on track with what you're doing, which is focusing on clean, healthy eating. You're getting it 80% of the time. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I do the same thing. My wife and I go out on date nights on Friday night. And if that's, pizza or cheeseburgers, whatever it is, that's the time it's the time to celebrate. We got through the week. We ate pretty well this week. We got our CrossFit workouts in the mornings. We did 100 burpees for the 1,000 burpee April challenge. We're ready to rock and roll, whatever it is. But, I think that's the right way to approach it. It's really challenging to stick to a sort of a monotonous diet, and you get something called palate fatigue when you eat the same foods over and over again. And so with the astronauts, they would get palate fatigue, right? Because they're eating the same foods over and over for 6 months. And so one of the things we tried to do was we tried to send up as many fresh fruits and vegetables as we could on the SpaceX rockets. So when SpaceX is launching a resupply rocket from Florida, we would work with the folks down in Florida to get some apples and oranges loaded onto the rocket at the last minute, because they might have a little extra cold storage or a little extra space in the cargo for maybe a science experiment didn't make it for this mission, so they're pushing the science experiment to the next mission. Well, we would get as much space as a briefcase, essentially. So we would essentially put as many apples and oranges as we can fit in a briefcase and then launch it up, because those fresh fruits and vegetables are something that's really missed for the astronauts when they're eating shelf-stable foods for 6 months at a time. So we would try to send that up as much as possible, and we would always get emails back from the astronauts like, rock on, guys, like, good job with the apples this time. Those really hit the spot. So we tried to do that a lot, and it's something that, we're really lucky to be able to get a lot of in our diet is fresh fruits and vegetables. And it's tough when you're in space because, they don't have the refrigerators to store that amount of food. So you can really only send up as much as fits into the rocket as at the last minute. And then you can only send what they are going to eat over a few days. Because you can't throw it in the refrigerator. So, you don't want your stuff getting moldy either. And we can only send as much as they're going to eat over the course of a few days.
Interesting. How do you guys, as like NASA food scientists, calculate the macronutrients for each person? Like, where do you get the macronutrients to make sure they're getting enough in their diet? And you mentioned fiber as well. They don't get enough fiber. Is that something that you have an issue with getting up there?
That's absolutely something that we were trying to do with the newer R&D food products, like the braised red cabbage or the freeze-dried Brussels sprouts. We were trying to up the fiber content. A lot of these foods, developed during shuttle, we would have the beefsteak or the meatloaf or the scrambled eggs or the cherry blueberry cobbler. Like it's foods that people are familiar with. We know they're going to eat, and we knew at that time that they provided energy. But our understanding is better today. So we know we need to be adding more fiber. We need to be reducing the amount of processed sugars. We need to be upping the protein content. We need to be including omega-3 fatty acids so that the astronauts are able to, right? So that the astronauts are able to, they've got a lot of inflammation in their bodies because space is an extremely stressful environment for the human body. So you need omega-3 fatty acids in your diet so that your body recovers faster. It's almost like an endurance athlete just running every single day. Your muscles are constantly under stress. You got to be able to get some omega-3 fatty acids into your diet so that your cells can rebuild their cell walls. So you're literally trying to heal all these cells that are under stress constantly. And so that's what we tried to do in the food lab. And so talking about macronutrients, for example, the NASA has government specs for the macros that the astronauts should be eating.
Get it, John.
Yeah,
of course they do.
Right? There are government specifications for exactly how, like what percentage of calories should come from protein, fat, carbohydrates, what percent should have, what percent of your calories should be coming from sugar, how much vitamins and nutrients and micronutrients. There are federal government specifications for how much of these the astronauts should be getting. And these are all based on the USDA dietary guidelines for Americans, which are a pretty good standard. So NASA took the USDA dietary guidelines for Americans and amped them up and said, okay, so not only do we talk about number of calories, number of percentages of the calories for each macro, we also really need to outline milligram or UI units for all these nutrients, micronutrients that the astronauts need to get as well. So it's kind of like the USDA dietary guidelines on steroids, and saying, like, in this, if you go into a closed environment for 6 months where you can't just walk down to the grocery store and buy an apple or an orange, like, you want to make sure people aren't getting scurvy, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right? So you got to be able to...
suck to get something up there with like that. You can't get a disease up there. That would be terrible.
You can't. So all these, NASA's nutrient specifications are run by the Nutritional Biochemistry Lab out of Johnson Space Center. And they've done a great job figuring out how many calories, what the macro breakdown needs to be, and how many micronutrients need to be in each bar. And that was the baseline that I used for creating my own product when I wanted to adapt space food technology for the front line here on Earth. So I used NASA spaceflight nutrition guidelines to develop my product as well, because these have worked really well over time for getting high performers to perform in stressful environments.
So I'm gonna caveat right into that side of it, right? So one of the things that I remember specifically about military life is, especially on deployments and stuff, or like a big disaster had happened, and I was not in Katrina, but I know enough guys that were down there, and during that time, what rolled up in a C-130? MREs, meals ready to eat, MREs. Yep. And I had plenty of them. We always had them in the shop, and if they're getting ready to expire, we'd pull them out of the raft, or we'd pull them out of the crew, the aircraft, and we'd stick a new one on there with a new expiration date. And we'd eat them. What I'm saying with that is morale tends to be food. 100%. Like, if there's one good morale thing, it's food. And the reason I say that is Katrina, the Master Chief rolled down, Master Chief swimmer of the Coast Guard, Scott Dyer. He rolled down there, went out to like the pizza joint somewhere in Florida or somewhere in Alabama, ordered, without exaggeration, 200 pizzas, loaded them on a Coast Guard airplane, and flew them into everybody that was working. And that was like the best day for everybody down there. Everybody talks about like, pizza showed up. It was amazing. So back to you. How do you bring nutrients like that and create something morale-wise it's super good, and bringing it to us in the rest of the world, like here on Earth?
Yeah.
That's where ReadyBAR came in, right?
100%. That was the origin for ReadyBAR. When I was at NASA, there were some things that just didn't make sense to me. Like, why are we baking chocolate chip cookies in space? Like, how does this positively impact the average American? I just didn't get it. And so after leaving NASA, I said, look, let's take some of these technologies that NASA's been kicking around, some of these ideas, that they've used, that they've published on. It's all open source. Let's take these ideas and actually make it applicable to the real heroes that are protecting our communities, to people that are on the front lines, because they've got the same nutritional requirements. They're working out a lot. They're in the field. They are in freezing water burning an extra 1,000 calories per hour as compared to the average American. Like, these folks have very similar nutritional requirements. And you're going to be in an environment without a large refrigerator. You're going to be in an environment, right, where you need to be able to pull something out of your helmet bag and it hasn't gone bad. You need to be able to be out in the middle of nowhere, pull a ReadyBAR out of your line pack, and know that it hasn't gone rotten in the previous 24 hours. These are really important aspects of food for the front line. And there are so many interesting analogies between space food and foods that we can use to fuel the front line here in the United States.
That's awesome. I actually think about, so I'll bring it back to my Rescue Swimmer world, as well as a bunch of other people that I've spoken to on this podcast. Well, let me start with like the guys up in Canada, like the Sartecs. Those guys literally fly out, jump out of the back of a plane, parachute in somewhere, and they're out there for 4, 5, 6, 7 days until like they get an aircraft or a helicopter, or they can hike to a certain point to get a helicopter to come rescue them, to get them out based on weather. Yeah. Pararescues, Air Force pararescues, same thing. They're out in the field for days. Navy SEALs, wildland firefighters, drop it in. They're gone for days. Yeah, like they've got resupply packs that get dropped in. I can totally see that this is where like good morale and good food to have with you out there in the bush or in the rough. Absolutely. I think about as far as Coast Guard rescue swimmers go, there's a couple of cases that I can think of right off the top of my head, including my own, of you're out there and like just going through calories and you need to refuel, find a way to refuel. You go out, you do a rescue, and you're flying back for 2 hours, and you need a way to refuel yourself. Yeah. I kind of took that over. I'm sorry.
I agree with you 100%. And MREs were, again, a lot of them were developed decades ago. And a lot of these foods and these food technologies for processing them and keeping them shelf stable, it came from World War II. And it came from figuring out how to get food to the front line safely and also provide positive morale for people. I think one of the challenges with MREs is that NATIC has done these tests for the Army, and they've shown that once warfighters eat MREs for more than 10 days, they get palate fatigue. Warfighters literally stop eating MREs and start losing muscle at 10 days. And that's why it's so important to provide more variety and more nutrition and more satiety in your foods. And it's one of the reasons that, you know, foods like ReadyBAR, I think, have a place in the market, is because you're able to mix things up. It looks good, it tastes good, and it's good for you. And it weighs less than an MRE, and it gives you more calories per unit mass than an MRE too.
Oh, that's good to know. I don't think I realized that. Because I know the package of an MRE is actually quite large. It's like it's relatively big. Like when you throw it into a helmet bag, it takes up a ton of room. So like a lot of us, we would take like a part of it out and use just a dessert. And you throw the dessert in your bag because that's a smaller pouch, or some of the crackers or something like that is what I remember throwing in mine. But
there's a lot of dead space in MREs. And that's one of the challenges with them, is that they are great for shipping around. They're great for shipping to forward operating bases for people to have them, right? And they're not as good for putting it in your helmet bag or putting in a side pocket or putting in your backpack, because there's a lot of dead space in the MRE. NASA was having the same issue. You know, when I came on, about 60% of the mass of all the food that we were sending to space, 60% of our mass was the packaging. And that's why it was so important to come up with new ways to reduce packaging. And that's one of the reasons that NASA was so interested in a meal replacement bar, was you're able to combine 3 or 4 different food items into a single package you drastically reduce the mass and the volume of your packaging, and then you've got something that is very portable for people. It's great for forward operating bases. It's great for people on the front lines. It's great for everybody.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm actually thinking about like the conversation I had with Spanky. And he like he goes out to the forward operating base, Marine base, and they got Pop-Tarts and Red Bull, and that's what he remembers.
Yep.
I was like, oh my God, like the most unhealthy combination you could possibly get. No, that's what they're eating. Pop-Tarts and Red Bull.
That'll get you going. That will get you you will sugar crash after that, but that will get you going for sure.
Oh man, it's kind of funny to me. But we're going to divert real quick to thank our sponsors.
Precision Aviation Group. Mission critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory, globally 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
All right, so I love this idea. Let's talk for a minute about some of the nutrients in ReadyBAR that you're bringing to the table with this. Like, again, for me personally, I like eating as clean as I can. I like hitting my macronutrients. I measure them. Where are we sitting with that?
With ReadyBAR, I wanted to create the perfectly balanced bar that has all your macros in the right proportions and the right number of calories for everybody. So one ReadyBAR, if you're familiar with the zone diet, men and women have different numbers of blocks that they're normally eating. Women are getting 3 blocks a meal, men are getting 4 blocks a meal. I averaged that. ReadyBAR is 3.5 blocks on the nose. So I wanted this to be accessible for everybody, for men and women. I wanted it to approximate what one meal would be for the average American. And then we've got balanced macros. We've got 25 grams of protein, 25 grams of fiber. We've got less than 10% of our calories from sugar, and no other meal bar has that. And that comes from what NASA was trying to do to get the sugar down in these bars. So nice. ReadyBAR's approach is the idea that you don't want to just triple a Cliff Bar. Like, let's say you're out in the field and you want an entire meal, but all you've got is Cliff Bars. Well, you don't want to eat 3 Cliff Bars because they're 25% sugar. It's way too much. You're going to sugar crash afterwards.
Yeah.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got a bunch of no sugar items. Let's say Quest Bar, for example. The issue with all of these bars is that they use sugar alcohols to stick it together and to kind of make it taste sweet without actually having any sugar. Well, the issue there is that you end up pooping your pants because your gut doesn't know how to digest it. So,
we're gonna come back to that one.
Okay, so there's a funny story with gummy bears about the sugar alcohols. So with ReadyBAR, what I wanted to do was I didn't want a lot of sugars, but I also didn't want to use sugar alcohols or artificial sweeteners. I wanted something that was balanced, that had a clean ingredient label, that had a low glycemic index, so that when you eat it, your blood sugar doesn't spike like if you're eating Pop-Tarts and Red Bull. I wanted it to be more like the glycemic index of overnight oats. So it just gets you to a good blood sugar level, and you're able to operate continuously for multiple hours without having to refuel, because there's no immediate blood sugar spike and crash. So that's the reason I developed ReadyBAR the way I did. Is we have a unique binding syrup that nobody else has that's able to make a delicious meal replacement bar without all the sugar and without the artificial sweeteners. And I'm really proud of that.
That's incredible, man. That's awesome. Let's talk about some of this can't digest stuff. I remember back in the day, and again, the reason what I want to do with this in particular conversation is I really want to dive into a lot of the nutrient stuff, and where people deal with stuff and may not know why. So one of them, and I'll never forget this, it was I think it was called Olean, and it was an oil that your body couldn't digest it, and it literally said on the packages, may cause anal leakage. Like no kidding. And it was like it was a joke in a movie, and right after that joke, boom, it was off the shelf, and no one ever used it again, so you don't see it anymore.
Yeah.
But they still use it in some of the sweeteners. So you have your sucralose, you've got your stevia,
Sucralose, stevia, aspartame, and then there are sort of like natural versions like monk fruit. A lot of these things, they're not sugar. They're 1,000 or 1,000,000 times sweeter than sugar. So you're able to put in a tiny amount, and it doesn't really give you. It essentially gives you 0 calories. It shows up as 0 calories on the nutrition label, because you're able to put in 1/1,000th or 1/10,000th of the amount of sugar that you would have to use. But the issue is, a lot of these artificial sweeteners, what scientific studies have shown is that they impact your gut bacteria. And your gut bacteria literally help you to digest food, literally help fight off the bad bacteria that can be caused by food poisoning. And they can be disrupted by these artificial sweeteners. And so that's what studies have shown. And with ReadyBAR, what I wanted to do was avoid these artificial sweeteners so that it's very easy to digest. It doesn't hurt your stomach. And let's say you're a structural firefighter, you eat one of these before a call, you don't have to worry about pooping your pants. Like if you eat several bars that have all these sugar alcohols in them, like allulose, sorbitol, xylitol, all this stuff, you don't have to worry about having to run to the bathroom, because these are all ingredients that are very well digested. And I wanted ReadyBAR to be easy to digest, but I also wanted it to taste delicious.
Right on, man. I appreciate that. And the reason I bring that up is like I drink my occasional Red Bull, I drink my occasional Monster or Rockstar, and I try to go the sugar free, which is probably the worst thing I can do. I'm admitting it now. Okay, I know it's part of my 20%. All right, back off. But I have had issues personally, and I can't believe I'm sharing this right now, where it's like, whoa, man, I drank that, and now it's new. It did not agree with me, and
feels weird.
I'm running through the rest of them. Yeah.
Yep.
So
100%.
I like, yeah. And I remember, kind of side story, me, my buddy Joe, and my buddy Lane, we all bought Mountain Dews throughout a 2-week period. It was a lot. Yeah, I really can't drink them anymore because of that 2 weeks. Like, it's terrible. But I say that because there's the bad stuff. I notice a difference. My wife will notice a difference. She's saying it right now. We're on a really good diet at the moment, and she feels better. Yeah. Like, she doesn't feel bloated. She doesn't feel achy. And I feel the same. I feel amazing right now. It's all clean. It's all good food. So, wow. I'm intrigued to learn more. Like, what else is bad for us, Ryan? Oh God.
In terms of what first responders should not be eating, there's this funny story about a structural firefighter. You remember the Haribo sugar-free gummy bears? That is in the gold bag. So they were in the gold bag, Haribo gummy bears, gold bag, sugar-free. So everybody loves gummy bears, right? How about sugar-free gummy bears? It's the best of both worlds. So there's this story about a structural firefighter eating a whole bag of sugar-free gummy bears, and then the tones go off, so he has to go to a fire, and he really has to go to the bathroom the entire time. And that's something that I discussed with one of my company advisors, Megan Laux, was making sure we don't have all these sugar alcohols or these artificial sweeteners, because it can disrupt your gut microbiota. Some of these sugar alcohols, allulose, your body doesn't even know how to absorb or digest it. So it's like that Olean stuff. It kind of gets shot out by your body, because your body's like, I don't know what this is, man. So that's why with ReadyBAR, I focused on oats and pea protein and rice protein, and having a clean ingredient label that people can look at and say, oh, I can tell this is going to be good for me. And know that it's going to be delicious, but also it's going to help them perform when they need it the most.
It's pretty badass, man. All from like working through NASA, sending food to space, trying to set those guys up for a full, proper nutrition while they're away. Like, that's well done, sir. Well done. It's pretty awesome. let me go one step forward, because we've talked a lot about the first responders and military, but the way this is designed and the idea behind this is, like, you're talking professional athletes, like marathon runners or ultras and CrossFit athletes, and like people that are burning through a lot of calories. This is a great way to replenish that clean, like as a clean response. That's cool.
Yeah,
What about kids?
absolutely.
Can I throw that in there too? Like, let's say my teenager is going to a volleyball tournament, and the only thing we have is Snickers and Mountain Dew in the like a concession stand. And for all of us that have kids that have been through that age, you're like, oh yeah, I got the nachos with the terrible cheese and the fake like everything. How would that work for them?
The funny thing is that often it's the foods that are everywhere that we find really easy to buy in grocery stores and corner convenience stores. A lot of times these companies are decreasing their ingredient costs so that they can pay their retailers. So what you end up with is foods that have national distribution, national, international distribution, but that company's paying so much money to the retailer that they have to decrease their ingredient costs. So a lot of times it's not that great for you. You end up using really cheap ingredients like processed sugars so that people will eat it, but it's also not healthy for you. So one of my big recommendations is be on the lookout for stuff that's really easy to buy that you see everywhere, like Snickers and Mountain Dew. The reason it's everywhere is because they've got low ingredient cost and they can pay retailers everywhere to have this stuff. So if you're out at the soccer tournament with the kids, be prepared. Have something in your bag that you know is good for them and for you. So you got to be prepared. If you don't prepare in terms of food, then what you're going to end up finding is that you're hungry. The closest thing to the soccer field is a convenience store, and when you've got low blood sugar and you're crashing, that's not the time to be making decisions about your diet. That's the time that you're going to buy the hamburger, you're going to buy the pizza. That's not the right time to be making decisions about how you're going to feed yourself the rest of the day. So the trick is you got to pre-position your food. You got to buy the food beforehand. You got to have the ReadyBARs in your backpack. You got to be ready to go. And I think that's what a lot of people have learned is that if you set yourself up for success when it comes to diet and nutrition, you're going to be great. You don't want to get into a situation where soccer tournament went 3 hours long. You don't have any food with you. Closest thing's a convenience store, so you buy a Snickers and a Mountain Dew. So there's a lot of applicability for the front line, and there's a lot of applicability for people who are stuck in a situation for 12 to 14 hours with no fresh food. Eat a ReadyBAR, 100%. There's just so much application for the average American. My brother-in-law is going through a rotation in med school, and he's excited about carrying ReadyBAR with him because he knows on 12 to 14-hour shifts where he can't get out of the hospital, he doesn't have right? He doesn't have to buy a soda and a muffin to keep going. He's going to cram a ReadyBAR. He's got 500 clean calories that are going to fuel him for the next few hours. He knows he's ready to go. So it's good fuel for the front lines, and it's good fuel for anybody who finds themselves in these scenarios where you're out without fresh food being available and you need something that you know is going to fuel you up.
Yeah, Ryan, man, I love this stuff. I really do. I really try to dive into my nutrition. Mel and I are pretty on point for the most part. Like we've gone off the wagon a little bit, but I like the fact that I can now go and get a new bar and know that it hits all my macros and I'm not eating junk. So I appreciate that. For everybody else, where do we find you?
You can find us at getreadybar.com, and we ship directly to our customers.
That's awesome. You guys also have social media and all that jazz, so follow along for new stuff, right?
Check us out at getreadybar on Instagram if you want to follow along with our story.
Perfect. Thanks, man. And you know what? As a special like promo right now, because you made it all the way through this entire episode, it is ResQ10. You get 10% off the order So thank you, Ryan, for helping us out with that. And everybody that's in the government, you can add the GovX discount and double down. So it's like the best deal you could possibly get on the ReadyBARs. So thank you for allowing us to do that. And actually, let me throw out one more thing. Is like you actually, with every box that's bought, one bar gets sent over or donated to people out there.
That's right. We donate 1% of all the bars that we sell to active duty first responders because we want the people that are protecting our communities to be performing at their peak level. And you can't do that if you're sugar crashing. So check out ReadyBAR and follow along at GetReadyBAR on Instagram.
Right on. Hey, thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. So I got one more question, and if there's any shout out you'd like to do with following that question, please help yourself. This is your platform. But my last question: if you had any advice to everybody to pass on, whether it's nutrition, whether it's like following your path of food scientist, going to NASA, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, my piece of advice is look at the nutrition panel on the food that you're buying. And look at how much sugar is in there. And there's a lot of products that just have an enormous amount of sugar. So check out the sugar. And if the sugar's providing more than 10% of your calories, find something else. It's tough when the only food you can buy nearby is at a convenience store. So you want to be prepared. And one of the great ways to do that is thinking about what's the food that you carry around in your backpack or your helmet bag or your go bag or your purse. Be prepared. And food is a critical part of emergency preparedness.
Right on. Thanks, man. You want to do a shout out to anybody before I let you go?
Yeah, let's do it. So wildland season is kicking off next month in Southern California, and it follows shortly after in Northern California, where I'm at after that. So we've had some dry spells around the United States, and there's going to be some tough wildland fires this season. And I want to give a shout out to all the wildland firefighters who are going to be serving this year. Support your wildland firefighter. It is a tough job, and it is a dangerous job. So thank you for your service, and everybody else out there. Make sure you're supporting the wildland firefighters that operate in your state as well. Right
on. Ryan, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I absolutely had a pleasure talking to you. I love diving deep into all this stuff, man. I'm so psyched I got to learn a couple things from you today. So I appreciate it, man.
I appreciate you, Quinny. This was a blast.
Awesome. And I look forward to when we get together, not only share a ReadyBAR, but we're going to split a beer or a whiskey. Just saying.
Sounds like a plan.
Awesome. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Go. Now, it's time for me to pull chocks and take off. But before I go, I'm always looking for the memorable rescues that people have done. If you have one that you're willing to share or know somebody who has a story, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to highlight it here at The Real Rescue. For everybody that is standing by for that SAR alarm, remember, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. So until next time, fly safe and swim hard. Thank you for joining me today here at the Real Rescue Podcast, powered by Vertical Helicast. We'd also like to say thank you to our sponsors for this episode.
Blue Drop Training and Simulation. Blue Drop Training and Simulation for equipping your team with essential training solutions, including highly interactive courseware and advanced VR/MR simulation training tools. Explore more of Blue Drop's training solutions at bluedropts.com. Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory, globally 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support. SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our third generation Night Sun series, high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights.
And ReadyBAR, originally made for astronauts, now designed for first responders and built for you. This high-performance meal bar provides complete nutrition without the sugar crash. A must-have for any helmet bag, swimmer bag, or everyday pack. Get yours today at getreadybar.com and use the promo code ResQ10 for 10% off. ReadyBAR, zero crash, all fuel. Hey, Ryan, everybody seems to have like funny stories from where they worked and what they did. Now, I can't ask you like a training flight question, so I'm going to ask you, what's the funniest thing you ever saw being a food scientist at NASA?
The funniest thing I saw was one of the chefs that I worked with when we were making food for the astronauts during quarantine. So they go into like 2 weeks quarantine so they don't get a cold while they're on the ISS, right? So they're in quarantine at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So me and my team are down there making food for, we're fully gloved up. We got the mask, we got the gloves. We're making sure that we're not passing on any diseases to the astronaut either. And we're cooking fresh food for them for every day during that 2 week quarantine. So one of the astronauts asks for his last breakfast. This is tradition. You get exactly whatever you want. You can request it for your last breakfast before you launch. So this astronaut asks for steak and eggs. So he takes a picture. One of my friends who's a chef, she was working with me down there. So she makes steak and eggs for him. She does a nice flank steak, cuts it up, nice scrambled eggs for him. It was a little well done. And so she serves it to him, and the astronaut snaps a picture of it, puts it on Instagram. It's like breakfast to champions before launching. And launch got scrubbed, right? Launch got scrubbed. So due to bad weather, they scrubbed the launch. They're going to do it again the next day. So Instagram blows up, and they're like, "Oh, that steak looks like shit." So everybody is hating. Everybody is hating on the steak. They're like, "Why would you cook a steak like that? Like, that's burnt." Like, they're like, "There's no pink in that, baby." They're like, "That's brown as a biscuit. What is going on with that steak?" And so my friend, who's a chef, and she knows who she is, she got so pissed off. So she actually went to the grocery store herself. She picked out the steak that she wanted. She cooked it to perfection the next day, sliced it pink in the middle, serves it with scrambled eggs the next day. It gets posted, and everybody goes, "Now that's a steak." So, moral of the story: when you're cooking a steak for astronauts, they will put it on Instagram. Make sure you don't overcook it. So she knows who she is. She was so embarrassed. She was so embarrassed because the internet didn't know who she was, but the internet knew that steak was way overdone. So she was she's a chef. She wants everything to be perfect. She was so embarrassed. And so moral of the story, the food that you cook will end up online. So make sure you are cooking your steak to the correct doneness.